Alright everybody, so today what we're going to be talking about in our video are the different types of writing that you might encounter here at the community college. Now, you may not encounter all of these, you may encounter, almost none of them, but these are the different things that are pretty normal for you to come across, be it at the community college or if you decide to move on to university. So the first type is probably the one that most of you are familiar with from high school and even before that. It's the essay. So there are lots of different types of essays, so I'm not going to get into all of them. You have things like comparison contrast, you have things like narratives, you have things like categorization, descriptors, things like that. So whatever it might be, they generally follow something very similar, if not an actual 5-paragraph essay. If you need any sort of clarification on that, go back to the videos where I discuss the parts of a 5-paragraph essay, as well as break down each section in more detail. So the second type is rhetorical analysis. Rhetorical analysis is when you investigate something based on the message that the author is trying to get across from you, to you. So you may have, you may examine sort of the relationship between the message, the author, and the reader. But more likely you're going to be talking about things like ethos, pathos, and logos, which in more modern English, we would describe that as the emotional appeal to something, whether it acts like other things within its own genre. So if you were, say, for example, talking about a comic book movie, or if you were talking about a Nicholas Sparks movie, does it act like other Marvel movies? Does it act like other romantic based movies? I won't say comedy, because Nicholas Sparks movies are certainly not comedies. And you're trying to not just look at what is the message the author is trying to get across, but are they successful in doing so? And more importantly, why are they successful in getting their point across? So for example, if we go back to the romantic movies, the Nicholas Sparks things, the general point of a movie like that, I've been told, because I'm not a fan, is to, have viewers place themselves within the fictional relationship to kind of react in their own emotional way. So if it does that, and for example, one of the movies would be The Notebook or Dear John or something like that, if you find yourself becoming emotional about the film, then it's done its job. Therefore, the rhetorical effect is successful. So research simply means that you need to go outside of your own experiences, and you need to go online, go to the library, find other people that have studied the same thing, see what kind of results they've come up with, and then either use their results to try and prove or disprove something about whatever it is you're talking about. So, for example, if you were trying to look and see if increased time watching, binge-worthy shows on Hulu or Netflix causes weight gain, then you might take a look at a scientific study that talks about inactivity, or you may take a look at the statistics for how many people are watching more and more television per, however many days a week they watch television. You also might want to look at what types of diets people have that tend to be more sedentary or not move around as much. And then see if all of those different research materials point you in the direction of sitting around and binging TV causes you to gain weight, or sitting around and watching TV has no effect on your weight. That's just an example. I know for me, I definitely tend to put on a few more pounds when I am heavily invested in a show that has a lot of different seasons and I'm trying to get through it. Summary and reaction. This is essentially when you are meant to read something. It's not always a fictional piece, but a lot of the times it is a fictional piece. They ask you to tell them what the main parts are. So they don't want you to reword the story or reword the poem and write out the whole thing in your own words. They simply want you to say, this is what happens, and these are the most important things that happen. Then, this is the really important part, because almost anybody can summarize something that they've seen before. They want you to react to it. So if you were watching a play or a movie or something like that, for the large majority of us, we like it when you get a good, fulfilling ending. I'm trying to think of a movie off the top of my head that I didn't enjoy the ending of recently, and I'm blanking on one, but or at least one that any of you might relate to. But essentially, you are giving your own opinion based on what you saw or what you read or what you witnessed. You're giving your opinion on how effective you think it is, and what are some things that I wouldn't use the words like and don't like. I would use terms like more effective and less effective. So if the story doesn't have a good round ending where you actually feel satisfied with the way that everything comes about, then your reaction might be more negative than someone that really, really liked whatever the ending is. So, for example, I don't know how many of you have seen the original Star Wars movies, but a lot of people either really, really like The Empire Strikes Back, which is the second of the originals, because it kind of ends on a dark note. You have a lot of secrets that are revealed. Other people don't like it so much because it appears as if the bad guys win. And if you are not a fan of, bad guys getting away with stuff, then it can be less effective for you. Journaling. Journaling is a type of academic writing that you'll probably come across at least once in a class. And it usually has something to do with building a narrative throughout the class. So you might start off talking about how you're unfamiliar with a particular subject, or you just had to take this class because it fulfills a requirement. And then by the end of the class, you'll be talking more knowledgeably about something because you've had a lot more experience with it. You also might have a journal like a research journal where you're building towards writing a big paper at the end of the semester. So you're asked each week to come up with a few resources that you might use in that paper and talk about them a little bit, kind of like an annotated bibliography, if any of you have had to do those. A book review is another one. Book reviews, you can go online and find lots and lots of examples of these, but essentially it's less summary and more reaction. So you're talking about it in a larger sense. So, for example, I just finished reading the new Stephen King book, Fairy Tale. So if I was going to be talking about that, I wouldn't talk necessarily for even a quarter of the review about the actual content of the book. What I would do is I would try and have my readers understand why this is a book I think you either should read or you shouldn't read. So for me, I don't know how many people are familiar with Stephen King, probably not a lot of you, but he wrote kind of a Lord of the Rings type story, or I won't compare it to Harry Potter, but I feel like that's the closest thing some of you might understand in terms of a multi-book series. He wrote The Dark Tower, and there are elements of fairy tale that are very much like the Dark Tower books. So if you were a fan of one, you would probably be a fan of the other. So I would probably talk about something like that. I would also talk about the symbolism that you may find in different characters, different settings. The book talks about gold a lot, as in like gold treasure. So one might investigate in a book review a little bit about what King's obsession is with gold, or what human beings' obsession is with gold. I could go into a whole other thing about precious metals, but let's just keep moving. Synthesis. Synthesis is typically what you would find at the end of a semester. It's either going to be, if you have a written final, there's going to be some type of synthesis level question on there, or if you don't have a written final, you may find yourself writing a paper that is synthesis based. And essentially what a question or a paper like this will do is it will ask you to go all the way back to the beginning of the class and then go through the class. So the question, whatever it might be, or the prompt, will essentially ask you to go all the way back from the beginning, and using everything that you've learned to that point, answer the question or write about the prompt. So you wouldn't have been able to answer the question well if you had only been to class but not done the reading, or if you only came to 30 out of 40 class meetings or something like that. You wouldn't be able to answer the question as well as someone that was there for every class that did all of the homework. So it's meant to test sort of your overall level of knowledge about what the professor, teacher, instructor has been talking about for the last 3 or 4 months. So that's what synthesis is. It basically means they're going to ask you something that's going to encompass the entire course and show your knowledge. It's your chance to show off a little bit what you've learned. And then finally, your literary review is somewhat similar to a book review, or a little bit similar to a summary and reaction. But what you're going to be doing for the literary review is, instead of trying to make connections between this book and other books that are like it that would encourage you to read this particular book or to stay away from it, or in terms of a personal reaction to something, the literary review is going to ask you to read a selection from someone. I think recently I helped a student out with a paper called The Library of Babel, which was incredibly difficult language-wise, even for me. And I'm almost 38 years old and have been an English teacher for a long time. So, but essentially, they don't have to be difficult. They may say, here is a poem, or here is a short story, like The Red Badge of Courage, or I don't know, something by Edgar Allan Poe, or something by, let's go back to Stephen King, something by Stephen King. A lot of his short stories got turned into movies and things like that. So what you're going to take a look at here is you're going to look at literary criticism, which is not a book review, like say in a newspaper. Literary criticism is where you're going to go to the website for the library, you're going to go to the catalog, search for Stephen King literary criticism, or John Fitzgerald, literary criticism, or Edgar Allan Poe literary criticism, or something like that. And you're going to see what other people have said about it. That's why it's really important when you use those library search engines that on the left-hand side of the screen, when you have the option, you want to click on scholarly / peer-reviewed and full text online. That way you know that the sources that you're getting, the other literary reviews that you're going to be reading, have been read and written by people that are in academia. So they're written by professors, they're written by instructors, they're written by sometimes exceptional students, and they're doing a deep, deep, deep dive into what makes this author tick, what are some of the secondary kind of themes that are going on in there, and you're going to build a review of this particular book based on other people's criticism that have been reviewed and in some cases edited or suggested that there should be edits by their peers or other academics. So it makes it more effective when you have, you know, Dr. Sarah Smith from Stanford writing a paper on, say, Edgar Allan Poe or something like that, as opposed to Billy Bob's book blog or something like that from Google. All right, there's a big, big difference there. In a future video, I'm going to talk to you about how you can use things like Google and Wikipedia to help you differentiate sources. Google and Wikipedia, unless you're talking about Google Scholar, are not academic sources on their own, but they can lead you to legitimate academic sources. So keep that in mind. There are more types of writing than this, so don't come screaming down to the tutoring center that I didn't fully prepare you by listing all of them, but these are the general ones that you will come across. You will always come across throughout your career at least one professor who's made up their own way of doing something, and that's okay. You know, you just do what they ask, come for help, ask them for help, come to the tutoring center, we'll figure out a way to help you. But at the end of the day, these are the types of writing that you will more often than not encounter throughout your academic career, both in high school, but certainly after high school. All right, in our next video, we're going to talk about different research methods, and then possibly we're going to talk about how to construct a thesis sentence in the next one. All right, have a good one.